Well, hello, everybody. Dan Turbyville, and this is Powerhouse Fence Show. Thanks for stopping by. Glad to see you. Good to have you here. So, this week we're going to talk about what happens after you sell a job. We're going to get into the early stages of what follows. So, we'll get into, contract a little bit, talk submittals, talk ordering material, preparing for the job, things along those lines. And yeah, that's what we're going to do. So here we go. The show is presented by Simpalo, Memphis Fence Company, and MFC Manufacturing. We have a few partners, in case you don't know, the Thornton Fence and Business Consulting Group. We've I put a little bit of content into his school, SKOOL, online educational deal. It's linked in the description below. I've just kind of been slowly adding stuff in there. He's been adding stuff. I think .com, Sam Natello, I believe they've been putting some content in there. So, there's a handful of people that are kind of compiling stuff together to put it all there in one spot. So definitely check it out if you're looking for a nice place to go with a lot of resources at your disposal. Um, all right, Fence News, industry publication. They've been doing it forever, and they have Pete and Jake. They always try to keep up with latest industry trends and cover a lot of topics. And they interview people and give do highlights about people and things like that. So check it out. It's linked in the description. All of these things are EZG Manufacturing, the big orange machines that you see on social media. Sometimes you see at trade shows, things along those lines. We use their stuff. We like their stuff. So they're up there too. Welcome to the show. Like I said, we already kind of talked about what we're going to talk about this week, the early stages of doing a job, right? So what we do immediately after we sell a job. So thank you all for listening. I appreciate you being here and giving us positive feedback. It is cool to get from time to time, and we do get it from time to time. So that's cool. If you want to hear us talk about anything specific, let me know. I'll do my best. If you want to have any guest on the show, if you want to be a guest on the show, anything along those lines, let me know, and we'll do our best to make sure that happens for you. Make-A-Wish fundraiser is still going. I think it is linked in the description as well. If you're feeling generous, feel free to stop by there. All right. So with all of that, man, I'm getting quick at that beginning bit. 3.5 minutes. Here in a little bit, I'm going to get it down to 2 minutes. So that way, you just skip the first 2 minutes of the show if you don't want to hear it. But now we're going to get into it. First of all, man, it's been hot. I saw like 2 days ago, I looked at the dew point map for the US, and I think our dew point in the US or in Memphis was like 81 degrees. It's ignorantly humid, and it's been tough. And we get these little pop-up showers, and it's sucked out there here recently. So it looks like summer's here, and we'll get a break from it here in a few months, I guess, but we get to deal with it for now. So, all right, for real, into the show. So what have we done so far, right? This is, again, building on previous topics and previous shows that have led us to here, okay? So we go all back, I don't know, I'm terrible at time. We go back a few months, and I'll tell you a story about how terrible I am at time. We bought this trailer, and, well, bought it new, sold it to a buddy, bought it back from a buddy, and we were taking it somewhere the other day, and I was like, for whatever reason, I said, "Hey, does that thing have tags on it? Like, did we ever tag the trailer after we bought it?" Well, it indeed had tags on it, but it was still my buddy's tags, come to find out. So my wife says, "Well, when did we buy the thing?" And I was like, "I don't know, maybe 6 months ago or 8 months ago, something like that." Well, really, it was like 19 months ago that we bought it. So time's a crazy thing for me now. And it seems to like progressively get worse. Maybe the older I get, maybe it's just because, we get busy. I don't know, whatever it is, but it's crazy. All right. So again, we're going to tie in some shows that we've already talked about, right? So we've learned how to understand our finances. So we've covered the basics of a P&L. We've covered going through establishing a set of books, maintaining a set of books, doing all of that stuff, right? Like getting our financial stuff in order. And it's important that we put things in the right spot. And I don't mean necessarily like getting down to the nitty gritty and putting the right expense in the right expense account. I mean, putting things that go in the cost of goods sold in the cost of goods sold and putting things that are expenses in the expenses, right? In order for us to get a good margin for a job, we have to make that separation right. So that way we can see what our actual gross profit and overhead and things like that have looked like in previous years. But yeah, so we've talked about, what margin we need and how we have to have that in order to continue to operate. So now, if we get a little bit deeper into our finances and our books and accounting and all of that stuff, we can do job costing now, right? And so we can look and we can know what type of job are we actually profitable on. Are we doing a bunch of jobs that we're not even making money on just to do jobs, or should we narrow our focus and primarily focus on a certain type of job instead of just going after everything we can get our hands on? So all of that information comes from your books. If you've listened way back when, the way things operated here was there wasn't really any of that. And I'd hear people be like, "Oh man, we made so much money on that job. We lost so much money on that job." And I always kind of wondered, like, how do you know? And still to this day, I don't think they did know. I think that it was just kind of a seat of the pants feeling, whether they thought they made money or not. Anyway, books are important. Accounting is important. Are important. Yeah. So also, we take a look at our own capabilities. And so we have a real understanding of the jobs that we are capable of doing and the things that we can perform at the level that we expect of ourselves. Okay. I think that's the important part of it. Are we capable of selling a job where we're building a high rise? Maybe, right? But I don't know anything about that stuff, and I can't perform at the level that I expect us to perform at. So I normally don't build big jobs building high rise buildings. Um, Drastic example, I understand, but you get the point, right? Let's see. We got old Craig Eubanks in here calling me old. He said it's all just due to old age, sir. I agree. It happens like that. And we do get old. So take a look at your capabilities, understand the jobs that you should and shouldn't be doing, right? Do that in conjunction with your finances so you know the jobs that you are and are not making money on. Are you not making money on a job that's less than, $1,500, right? Then don't do those jobs, or just charge more for them and make it worth your while, right? It doesn't mean you don't do them. You just charge what you need to charge to be profitable. So we took a look at that stuff. We understand what we can do, and we realize that it's okay to admit that we can't do certain jobs, right? They don't fit our business model. We're not good at them. We don't know anything about it. Like, whatever that is, it's okay to not do certain jobs. And so we looked at all that. We found a job because we did some marketing. Maybe we went to, the job boards of the world. Maybe we went to Builders Exchange or Construct Connect or, any of those type of things. And we went out and we found some jobs to bid, or maybe we found the job through networking or relationships. Something happened. Somehow we got our hands on a job that we could bid and we sold. We've gone through the plans and specs thoroughly, and we're confident that we didn't miss anything. We've thought through the entire process of what it's going to take to install that job, and we understand what all's involved in it. We understand the site, we understand the layout of the fence, the material, the specs, all of that stuff, right? We understand what goes into the project, and we know what it's going to take for us to bid the job, build the job, and bill the job. That's interesting. Bid, build, bill. Hmm. All right. So we calculated our labor, material, equipment, travel, our permit fees, any kind of shipping cost or freight cost. A lot of the stuff that you have to order from manufacturers that get shipped halfway across the country to you, uh, has freight cost with it, right? So if you get a quote from them, it'll probably be on there. But just be careful of that. That sometimes can be one of those kind of sneaky costs that if you just go get a price for something on the internet and you don't even think about the shipping cost of it or the taxes or things like that, those can kind of be sneaky little costs that get stuck in there on you. So we did all that. We put together a proposal. Our proposal was professional. It was well put together. It was clear. It was concise. The general contractors, they could find the information that they were looking for easily. It was right in front of their face. There wasn't no digging through 20 pages worth of stuff or any of that. Because remember, we put our scope of work and our price on page one. And then from there, all of the 20 pages of fluff that we feel like we got to put in there, it's all behind it. So we give them the information that they want right there. It's easy to find. Then we get a phone call. And sometimes between the submitting the proposal and getting this phone call, sometimes there's some other stuff. On certain jobs, you might be interviewed. All right. So they might go through, they might pick 3 subs that they think are a good fit for a certain scope, and they might do interviews with these subs. And so you might have a procurement team that reaches out to you and wants to schedule an interview, or maybe they have an application that you have to submit. There are GCs out there where you have to be approved to work on their projects. Sometimes they will let you bid a job without having submitted that approval, and if they want to award it to you, then you have to go through the process. There's one GC in particular I know that we have to redo like every 2 or 3 years maybe. And man, I think their application process or their application is like 20 or 25 pages long. And we have to put all sorts of OSHA forms and financials and different things like that. I really get excited about financials, and I don't know. I think they're very important if you can't tell. But we have to give them all of this stuff. And it's a pretty lengthy application that you have to fill out, or they call it a pre-approval or whatever word they use. But anyway, like I said, 2 or 3 years, you got to do it. It's a part of doing business if you want to do business with those people. So there might be some other steps in between, right? There may be some back and forth questions about, hey, did you include this? Did you include that? How much could we save if we did this? Depends on the job. Sometimes there's none of that. Sometimes a contract just shows up in the mail, so to speak, email, whatever, and you never even knew that you were getting it. Sometimes you have to go through 12 rounds of bidding a job before you ever actually get a contract. There's, a million different scenarios that we've seen. We have a contract on a job right now, and we did that. I think we bid it like 7 times. And then they sent us a contract, and I think there's already been like 4 change orders. Like when we were getting started on the job, they added stuff, they changed this, they changed that. Those are cool, right? That's fine. And that's a part of it. Just be careful as I go through this thing. I didn't think about this whenever I was looking at the contract stuff, but there is a thing where a lot of people will limit the markup, the overhead, the profit, whatever words on change orders. And so you got to be a little bit crafty whenever you're putting together one of those change orders and you're breaking out all of your stuff, because they will want to see material cost and labor cost and things like that. And if you're running a, 40, 50, 60% margin, something like that, and they limit you to a 10% overhead and 5% profit, it's a little bit of a process to work through that. But yeah, so that's a thing that happens. So like I said, sometimes between the proposal and the contract, there are some steps, but let's just say we have a contract. Okay. So, or we get a phone call and they say, hey, we're going to send you this contract. Can you go ahead and do this, do that, do this? And I do not like that at all. I don't want to do anything unless I at least have something in writing that says they're going to hire us. We're going to be awarded the job. I like for them to say, oh man, we have a storm blowing in, and I'm really hoping that the internet doesn't go wonky because of it. We experienced that a few weeks ago. Hopefully we don't again. But anyway, what did I do to myself? I forgot what I was saying. Yeah, so I like to get something in writing, and that may just be an email of, hey, we're going to award you such and such job, and your price is this amount, right? I like to kind of have that in there. Sometimes they're in a hurry for submittals because like the fence has to be done on the front end of the project. I don't like doing it. I can tell you I've done that before, and I've never gotten a contract. And then come to find out, oh, we decided to hire somebody else instead. Oh, another person was handling that and they hired somebody else, whatever the case may be. I've done submittals and turned them in and find out later on that we didn't get the job. So that is a thing that happens. Sometimes I kind of go for it. It just depends on who it is and the scenario. But I try not to put anything into a job unless I know for sure we're getting the job. As far as submittals and things like that go, I'm definitely not going to order material, right? The 99% of the time, I'm not going to order the material. There may be some weird scenarios where we would, if we do a lot of business with somebody and they want us to, for whatever reason, get a jump start on all that, maybe. But I'm going to be really lenient. And if it's some material that we would use anyways, okay. If it's some crazy special order stuff that we would sit here for 10 years before we ever gave it away, nah, I'm not real interested in ordering that material unless I have something really concrete in place that says we're going to get the job and we're going to get paid for the material. Um, and that could be an option too, right? If you are just in a bind and you got to do it, you might be able to get something, a quick email or letter or something like that that says, hey, I acknowledge I'm asking you to order the material beforehand. We don't have any submittals approved. You don't have a contract. And, if something falls apart, we're still going to pay for the material. That would make me feel a little better. But overall, I just try not to do any of that stuff before I have an executed contract. Same thing with installing, right? I really don't want to put people on the job site. I don't want to do submittals. I might do it. I don't want to order material. There's a very small might do it in there. And if somebody wants me to start installing before we have a contract, no, it ain't happening. Um, so there is a notice to proceed, right? You can get a notice to proceed through email, and that's normally like my bare minimum thing before I'll start doing submittals. They do take time, right? They're not something that just instantly happens. I don't have a giant catalog of every possible type of fence in the world. So sometimes submittals just take a lot of time, and I don't want to put that effort in something we're not going to get. But yeah, if there's a notice to proceed, then, a lot of times I'll roll the dice, to be honest with you. Um, but I always want something in writing before I'm going to do that. And even the time that told you that comes to mind where we sold the job and then they wound up and hired somebody else. I had an email that said, hey, we're going to hire you for such and such job. It's a local GC that we do some stuff with. And probably if I wanted to really push it, I could have sent them a bill for the submittals or something like that. Uh, but yeah, I lost out on that one. And that happens sometimes. But all right, enough of that. So we got a contract. That actually might show up in the mail sometimes, depending on who the contractor is. There's still some of them that will print out a contract or two copies of a contract, put it in the mail, put a cover letter in there, do that whole thing, and they put it in a big envelope and they mail it to you. That happens sometimes. Most of the time, it's electronic. It's going to be either just an email or through DocuSign or something along those lines, right? Normally, it's electronic. So the first thing I do when I get a contract, before I ever even dig into it and before I ever really start reading through the contract, is I just take it and I send it to my insurance provider and I say, hey, can y'all do a contract review for me? That's very important for me as well. And so what they're going to, which if I did my job well, when I was bidding the job, then I reviewed the insurance requirements if they were provided. Sometimes there's some variation between what's on the bid documents and what you get on the contract. So that's a thing. But stuff like primary non-contributory, that can be expensive. There's other endorsements and waivers and things like that that might cost money. You might have to get a whole additional type of insurance coverage to do a job. We've ran into scenarios before where we had to significantly increase certain coverages or get additional coverages or whatever. And so that does happen. So just you want to have a good understanding of what you're getting into with the insurance stuff. And the primary non-contributory thing, it's a real pain for me, right? Because it's very common in contracts nowadays. And I cannot get a blanket primary non-contributory coverage that just allows me to issue however many of them a year I need, that my insurance company won't do it. And so every time we have to pay endorsements on it. And the way it's set up is it's so much money per layer, I think they call it, but it's basically so much money per $1 million worth of liability coverage. It goes all the way through your GL and your umbrella. And so we have to pay, and we have to pay that every year. So the time that it's a big problem to me is on small jobs. So if we get, I mean, we've walked away from some five, six, $7,000 jobs because they put this primary non-contributory coverage in the contract and it wasn't disclosed during the bidding process. One time I can specifically remember, I even asked them and they said, no, it's not going to be required. And it was some temporary fence, right? But I've walked away from some contracts because they put that in there and I know how much it costs and I understand that, like, well, this is a 3-year long project, and then I might have to continue my insurance coverage for 3 years or 5 years or sometimes 10 years after completion. And I got to pay that every year. So it is something you can negotiate, right? You can go through these contracts and you can negotiate on things. You can redline stuff. You can do all of that. It doesn't mean that they're going to be okay with it, right? But you have to sign a contract that you're okay with, not just sign a contract that they're okay with. Because remember, it's their contract. It's structured to protect them, not you. Anyway, so I sent it to my insurance agent and I asked them to go through, do a review of the contract. They'll do it. And they send me back this giant email every single time. And uh, I might take the email, honestly, and put it into Chat GPT or some sort of AI and say, hey, can you explain this to me like I'm in kindergarten? Right? Because there's so many words that they use and all this kind of stuff. It just makes it it's hard. So, but yeah, our insurance agency, they're pretty thorough. They'll go through all of that stuff. If you don't have an insurance agent that will help you with that kind of review, then you might want to get a different insurance agent, is just my suggestion to you. Just think about that. So, yeah, then we start reviewing the contract, right? So, we've gotten the contract, we've sent it to our insurance agent, we've asked them to do a review. They'll start working on it, they'll do their thing. And then we're going to go through the contract. And so, what that means to us is if it's 100-page long contract, we're going to read ish that whole 100 pages. There might be some sections in there that I'd kind of like skim through a little bit, but I'm looking for, because there's a lot of legal jargon in it, right? I'm looking for the meat and potatoes of it. And sometimes you read it and you might have to read the same thing 4 or 5 times and you're just kind of like, what is going on? But yeah, so we'll go through this whole 20, 30, 50, 100 page, whatever it is contract. We go through the whole thing and we're looking for stuff that's abnormal. And I'll tell you, if it's your first time reading through a contract and you actually sit there and read the thing, it's all abnormal. You know, you might see stuff in there like they're not going to pay you more if the cost of your material goes up. Sorry, it's just the way it is. Especially since COVID happened, there's been a lot more language in contracts about that. Sometimes it's on like the cover letter, right? They'll point out some kind of bullet point stuff on the cover letter, and that might be one of those things there is no, we're not going to pay you anymore, right? The price that we agreed to is the price that you're going to do this fence job for. Now, if it changes, obviously that's different, right? But they're not going to pay you for material increases. Um, you know, there's state laws that dictate a lot of this stuff. In the state of Tennessee, I believe it's a pay when paid state. So if a contractor doesn't get paid for work, they don't have an obligation to pay us. So again, a crazy thing that you're going to see in a contract if you read through there. Your state may be different, right? I just know that's how it is in Tennessee. They're going to hold retainage. So when you submit a bill, they're going to hold anywhere from 5, 10, 12, 15% of the bill you submit that's going to be released upon substantial completion or completion of the entire project. So if you're doing temporary fence on the very beginning of a 3-year long project, you're not going to get that retainage until all the way 3.5 years down the road. And you know, if it's a $5,000-$6,000 temporary thing, not the end of the world. But I mean, it can add up, right? You get 20 or 30 of those sitting on your receivables, and you can have a decent bit of money tied up in retainage. So when I'm going through the contract, another thing I'm looking for is the schedule, right? We talk a lot about schedules. I'm looking for the schedule because I want to make sure that it's realistic for what we can do. Again, try to understand what our capabilities are, try to understand what we can actually accomplish. So I'm going to look at schedules. I'm going through all of the exhibits, all of the attachments, anything like that that's in the contract. I'm going to review it all. I want to try to read as much of all of those documents as possible because when you sign the contract, you're agreeing to every single letter that's in that entire thing. Now, there's a lot of stuff in there that doesn't even apply to us, right? There will be, I don't know, professional liability insurance or, maybe, what do they call it? It's like pollution liability insurance, maybe. There will be stuff like that, specifically in the insurance section. But there's other things, right? We're not doing any design work. We're not doing it, and so there are things in the contract that don't apply to you, which is one of the things that I would like to redline and just be clear, like, hey, this does not apply to us, right? It doesn't fit the scope of what we do. It's not necessary. It doesn't apply. So anyway, like I said, all the exhibits, all the attachments, and look for anything that's really scary because a lot of the stuff is kind of typical, right? But every once in a while, they sneak some crazy stuff in there. And we've been going through a contract. I promise you, we've been going back and forth with this company, I bet for 3 months at least. And they are a massive worldwide company. I think they're like property management, I guess. And I think they employ something like, I want to say something like 170,000 people work for this property management company. They're massive. Okay. Which all of that means that their contract process is really complicated. And this isn't even the contract for the job. This is like a contract to be a vendor for them. It's kicked our butt a little bit, and there's been a lot of crazy things that are in there, and we've been able to negotiate and kinda go back to them and get a lot of that removed, right? So if you have questions about that kinda stuff, I do have a phone number that scrolls on the bottom of this screen every single week, 901-878-4987. You can call me if you want to. Feel free. You can call a lawyer. You can call a friend that's a general contractor, right? I would probably not call a friend that works for the same company or the person that sent you the contract. Like I would try to put a little disconnect in there. And then I would also keep it anonymous, right? I wouldn't call my buddy and be like, hey, guess what old so and so GC sent me? You ain't never going to believe it. Like I try to keep it anonymous. And you could call another fence person. So if you know somebody in the fence industry that's dealt with a lot of these kinds of contracts and stuff, like you can call them. You can ask AI. Just I say do that with some caution because it will 100% lie to you. So for off and on for a couple months now, I've been building this prompt to do something in AI, and I keep catching it lying to me, right? And I even have it. It now every section that it returns, it'll put a little green check and it'll say no false positives found. And then I go through there and I'm like, well, you told me this was here, but it's not. Like that doesn't even exist, right? So I mean, and I've probably got, I bet 6 hours in building that prompt or 8 hours or 10 hours in trying to get it refined, right? To get it to where it's giving me what I want it to give me. So it will lie to you. Um, but anyway, we've gone through the whole process, right? So we sign the check and we are the check. We sign the contract and we send it back to them. The vast majority of the time, they have to sign it before we get it back. Okay. And so if both parties have not signed that contract, it's not fully executed. And again, 99% of the time, I'm not spending money unless that contract's fully executed. Um, so that means we've reviewed it, we've redlined it, we've negotiated some of the stuff, and we've gotten to an agreement that, well, we agree to, and then we've sent it back to them. And then now it's their turn to go through and make sure they agree to it and send it back to us, right? And so once everybody's done that, then it becomes an executed contract, then it becomes binding. And so again, just wait until you get it back, right? That was a lot of talking for a thing that a lot of times it might take you an hour or 2 to go through a contract, right? You might get one that's complicated and it takes you half a day or something. Like there are more complicated contracts, but most of the time it's just an hour or 2. Just pay attention to what you're reading and make sure that you understand what you're reading and what it says. So it's not something that you want to be like halfway paying attention to and and maybe you do, right? But I don't suggest it being something that you halfway pay attention to. Like take it kind of seriously. So there's a lot of requirements in the contract, right? And I wouldn't tell you to disregard it. In fact, I kind of steer to the opposite. I'm one that's like, well, yeah, it's probably not going to happen, but there is that like less greater than 0% chance that it's going to happen. And so I want to address it. But what I found is if a contractor wants to be a jerk to you, right? Maybe you're not doing what they think you should be doing. Maybe you're not performing quickly enough. Maybe you, I don't know, told them that they were ugly. Like whatever it is, maybe they're offended by you, right? And if they want to be a jerk, they will find something in there to hold over your head. I don't know, that's not a very common thing, right? But I'm just telling you it can happen. In my experience, the worst ones that I've dealt with are new project managers. And when I say new, I mean like straight out of college, first job they've ever been on, maybe even intern project manager, something like that. That has been my worst experience in dealing with project managers in general. Um, and I feel like on some of these jobs where I've dealt with them, it's because we're the fence people, right? And it's like, oh, it's just a fence. You can handle this. Right? I mean, it's kinda they look at it like sending them to go do their laundry or whatever, take their laundry to the dry cleaner, whatever you wanna say that, right? Is kind of how I feel like they look at us. I definitely don't agree with that, but just that's the realization or that's real. So they'll put these new, straight out of college, don't know anything project managers on us. They don't have any real world experience, and everything to them, they want to stick to it and be 100% by the books. Those are the ones that take some crazy thing out of the contract and dangle it over my head. And they're like, "Oh, well, this contract says that when you show up out here, your shoes are gonna be tied on, and double knotted, and I caught you the other day without them double knotted." And, that's just like some crazy stuff that they wanna pull out of there. Um, but I don't know what it is, right? I think that they just feel like they're gonna get a gold star from somebody if they, "Oh, I beat that fence guy out and got him to do what I wanted," right? And somehow they think it gets them a gold star, but I've seen more than one of them fired on projects too. Uh, Two of them come to mind just like that, right? If I thought about it, I could probably think of some more. But we'll start a job off with them and then we'll get on into the job, and all of a sudden they just disappear and somebody else is talking to us. And then you later find out, like, somebody slips up and tells you something that happened to them or whatever. So, like I said, I've seen a few of them get fired. It happens. And now it's time for a tea break. I really need some better sound clip to play for tea break. Crickets doesn't sound very appropriate. All right, so a lot of the stuff, like I said, a lot of the stuff in the contract, it might not apply to us. It might not be enforced, right? If you want to know if it's going to be enforced, if you want to know if it's going to apply to you, just ask somebody. I mean, you can call the person that sent you the contract, a project manager, probably. I might not go to like the I don't know, admin person who emailed you the contract, right? I'd probably go to the project manager. Hopefully you've met them by now and be like, "Hey, is this for real? Is this really going to apply?" Um, so anyway, sorry. All the way back, we sent it to our insurance company before, right? Now we've gone through the contract, they've gone through the contract, they've given us their review, we approve of everything. So you can go ahead and have them issue the certificates and just get it out of the way. It's easy to do aside from reviewing their review if that's complicated, but uh anyway, just get it out of the way. And then we're going to start working on submittals. And so Submittals are a very common question, right? When I'm talking to people about Simpalo, a lot of times during demos, we wind up talking about the fence business, right? And kind of how we operate and the way that we do things. And that's a pretty common thing that we're going to talk about. And submittals are something that frequently come up because Simpalo doesn't do submittals for you. And so people want to know how we do it, right? Because it's a struggle, it's a pain, it's a struggle, but it's a part of it. Uh, I don't know if I've ever told this story, but um, man, back years ago, and I'm talking probably 20 plus years ago, I heard a story. I did not personally witness this, but I heard a story that my dad one time was asked to do submittals on a job. And it was like we were matching some existing fence and extending it. And they said, "Well, we need submittals from you." And he's like, "What do you mean you need submittals? Like, we're just going to do the same thing that's already there." And they're like, "No, no, 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 no. We got to have submittals. It's got to be signed off on, all of this stuff." Right. So this joker makes submittals on toilet paper and like makes a like 24 by 36 cover sheet. So like a plan size cover sheet and writes out all of this stuff. And he's like, basically at the end of it was something along the lines of, I did it on toilet paper. That way, when you're done looking at it, you can recycle it and use it to wipe your butt or something like that. And submitted it. Like it genuinely got sent to a general contractor. Crazy stuff. I later took a class, a project management class, who that was taught by a guy that worked at the company that he submitted the toilet paper submittals to. And I was sitting in that class, and of course, I'd heard the story. And this guy looked dead at me, and he said, "Even if you think the submittals are completely useless, you still got to turn them in." And I was like, "Hey, man, I didn't do it right." But anyway, fun story. So, a lot of manufacturers out there, they have drawings. I know AFA has a catalog of drawings, Stevens Pipe, Master Halco, like a lot of these manufacturers and associations and things like that, they have catalogs of drawings that you can use. Um, and you can go get them and you might have to modify them a little bit, right? It might say schedule 40 and you need it to say domestic schedule 40 or whatever the case may be. Like it might require a little bit of tweaking, but it'll get you close. So I like to use AutoCAD. Okay. There's a lot of drafting software out there. There's some of it that's free, kind of like open source stuff. I like to use AutoCAD. I learned how to use AutoCAD when I was in school, and that's just kind of been the thing that I've stuck with. I started off using Corel Draw, which is more of like a graphic design kind of software than AutoCAD. And then when I went to school, I started learning AutoCAD and transitioned to that. And that's what I've used ever since. What I like about it is I can draw anything I want. So I'm not ever limited to some drawing that I can find from a supplier or manufacturer, anything like that, right? I'm working on submittals right now that are for dumpster gates that we have to build, and these that nobody's going to make the drawing for me. We are the manufacturer, and so I could hire someone to create them. They're not on any supplier, manufacturer, none of that stuff. They're not anywhere, right? They have to be made. Um, and so that's where AutoCAD or learning a drafting software really comes into play is when you have to make something that doesn't exist. So I would suggest that people learn it, especially if you're going to get deeper into doing some stuff, right? Just and maybe that's a thing that you think about when you're deciding what you're going to bid and what you're not going to bid. Can you do the submittals for it? Do you have to include money in there to hire someone to create those submittals? But anyway, so if you might have to pay somebody, right? If you do them yourself, just they take time. So with my submittals, I include the scope of the work, and so it'll say so many feet of this type of fence, so many feet of that type of fence, so many gates. Here's the gate sizes. Like I take my proposal that I submitted for the job, I remove the price, and then I put that like as my cover sheet on my submittals almost. And so that way, it's got the whole scope of work outlined again. I include drawings of the fence, drawings of the gates. Depending on what it is, if it's plated, then I want to make sure I specify what type of plate it is. The post is centered in the plate. I'm putting 4 anchors. Here's what type of anchors they are. And I try to be not like overly thorough, but I try to be fairly thorough on it. Um, I want to make sure that they understand, right? So I'll put, like I said, on the drawing side of it, I'll try to be a little bit thorough there. And then I'll include the product data. So going back to the manufacturers and suppliers and stuff like that, most of them have product data that's available for whatever they're making or whatever they're supplying, right? So I'll include that. That might be like for the chain link fabric, wire, whatever you want to call it, the pipe, the fittings, things along those lines. I might put that in there. Let's say we're putting some gate hardware on there from Lock and Knox, right? So I'm going to include a little 1 or 2 page thing from them for the hinges, for the latches, for stuff like that, whoever that is. Uh, Gate automation, same thing. I'm going to include some stuff in there for the type of gate operator we're putting in. I'll probably put loop detectors and photo beams and our fire department stuff and all of those things, right? I'm going to include it all in the submittal package. I've We're doing one job right now, and we had a bunch of tie metal gates on it and had their whole operators and their locks and everything else. And man, I think that submittal package is like 70 pages long. It's crazy. It's the longest one that I've ever done. It's not the most complicated, but it is the longest, I believe. So it might seem like I do a lot, but this is a point in the process. Again, bidding the job, right? I like to be thorough on that. And then again, when I'm doing submittals, I like to be thorough because I don't want there to be any surprises for anyone later on. If they have a problem with what you install later, it's a lot more complicated to fix than it is to change a submittal. And it's okay to say, well, that's the way I bid it. I didn't put money in there to do it that way, but you better have something to back it up. If you bid putting, I don't know, some sort of like, let's just say the cheaper kind of like spring self-closing hinges on it, right? And you turn it in on your submittals and they say, no, that doesn't work. Well, all you asked for was self-closing hinges, and that's what I included. So if you want something different, I can do it, but you're going to have to give me a change order for it. I think there's scenarios like that. Now, don't do that and then them pull out the spec book and be like, well, looky here. It told you exactly what to put on there. So no, this is what you're going to put on there. Well, because now you've already signed a contract saying you're going to do the job. It was included in the specs, so you're kind of out of luck on that one. But anyway, like I said, I'd rather kind of sort through all of that stuff on the front end, make sure everybody knows what's going on as well as I can. There's always going to be scenarios out there on the job where you run into something that you didn't turn in a submittal for, right? Um, so we call them cutbacks. I know a lot of people call them bias cuts. Like I don't really have drawings made for that. All of the drawings I have of fence are on level ground. So if it goes up and down hills and through ditches and all this crazy stuff, like I don't have drawings for that. But if you're getting into a scenario where you are running into a lot of that kind of stuff and you've got ditch crossings, well, you probably need to make drawings for the ditch crossings at least. But anyway, like I said, I try to be pretty thorough on my submittal stuff. And then I send in the submittals and I'll wait for them to come back. There are weird scenarios where I might not turn in submittals. Okay, so we're doing temporary panels. I'm not giving them submittals normally, right? They don't ask for it. I'm not going to do it. So there's sometimes where submittals are not required. There are a very few weird occasions where I might do something before I get the submittals back, but that's against protocol. Okay. So there's not going to be other folks here that are doing that without coming to me and explaining to me why they need to do it a different way outside of our normal process. So I don't want to order material, right? If the submittals are not approved and we had already ordered material, then we're stuck with it. So again, there are weird circumstances, but that's kind of the general thing. You might have to go through a few rounds of submittals even. So they're kind of like we did with the contract, right? We might have to go through a few rounds of that. There's a lot of contracts you just sign and send back in. I mean, they're not all like this whole process, okay? I'm just kind of giving you a broad spectrum of how things can be. Submittals can be 1 page, right? You might just be doing 6 foot tall chain link and you give them one drawing that's 6 foot tall chain link that you pulled off of Stevens Pipe's website and you send it in and it gets approved and you're good to go, right? I mean, there's opposite ends of the spectrum. There's stuff all over the place. The 1 page ones are really cool, right? The little 20-minute contracts that are super easy to go through, those are cool. Those are normally from a local, smaller general contractor. So that's why I've said a lot. If you're first getting into this world, It's a little bit easier to start off working with smaller local general contractors than it is to just jump straight to the largest contractor in the world. So, the bigger, in general, the bigger the company you're working for, the more complicated the process is, right? So, start with the small one and get your feet wet. Same thing, contract submittals, the whole process, right? Tea break. All right. Added that little drum roll in there for some flair. Not really drum roll, whatever that was. Okay, so I get my submittals approved. Now I want to order material as soon as I possibly can. I don't want to wait around until they're ready for me to go on the job. Nothing is always, okay? I like that saying. I think it's true. Nothing is always. But I want to order material as soon as possible, especially nowadays. Um, we get in these times. And if you have been around for a while, this is not the first time you've experienced prices increasing. And if you're going to be around for a while, it won't be the last time, right? But you get in these times where the steel markets and other markets are pretty volatile. And especially in those scenarios, I want to try to order material as soon as possible because I don't want to get 6 months or a year down the road and order the material and have to pay 10, 15, 20% more for it than what I could have bought it for now. So as soon as I get submittals back, I really want to order material. Um, I a lot of times, most of the time, contractors will pay you for stored materials. Okay. Something that's been happening more and more often lately is that I say lately over the course of the past, I don't know, 5, 6, 8 years, whatever. I've seen a lot more of the situation where you have to pay for all the material before you can bill for it. And so what that means is if we buy $10,000 worth of material, then we have to receive the material, get a bill, write the check for the material, show the general contractor the bill we receive, proof of payment, a- and we normally will have to get a lien waiver signed by the supplier in order for the GC to release payment to us. There are times where if the planets just align, you can time it right to where you might get paid within your terms from your vendor. But I would not count on it. It's a pretty rare scenario where that happens, especially now that the whole pay before you can bill thing is more common, right? So a lot of times you got to pay before you bill. Just know that's the way it is. If you need to have a conversation with the general contractor about material, I would have that conversation with them as soon as possible. Mainly, like I would put it on my proposal. I've been bid several really large projects recently, really large in my world, anyway. And on those proposals, if I say like, "Hey, you're either gonna have to pay for the material up front, or we'll do a joint check agreement with the supplier," which basically means that the general contractor would write a check to both of us. I endorse it, then it goes to the supplier. So I'm cool with doing that or something, right? Like I can't afford to finance this job for you. And so I'm going to need some help on the material. That goes on my proposal. And again, I like to try to tell them as soon as I possibly can. I don't like to wait. Oh, man. I don't, hold on. I like to let them know as early as I can. Any of those kind of things, right? And kind of revert all the way back to the proposals. I'm sorry, but I think it's important that you try to be as detailed as you can about any of that kind of weird stuff, right? If you need help with paying for the materials, put it on the proposal. If it's one of the things that we've ran into quite a few times here recently is you're putting a fence around maybe a substation, a water tower, whatever it is, and there's 8 inches of new gravel that they're putting in, and your fence is in that gravel. Well, the way that I've experienced that and the way that we approach it is we're going to go out, we're going to set post with sonotube. So the footing goes all the way up to the gravel because that's how they have wanted it for us, at least. And we have to go back and cut the sonotube off because they really get mad if they see the top of sonotube exposed around that concrete footing once they put gravel in. But I will maybe like spell that out right and say, hey, this is the way we planned on doing it. And I would honestly, I do it because I think, well, I want to show them that we've thought this through. I want to show them that we know what we're getting into and we're going to do the process the way that works. And I guess a part of my hope is that if they don't want it done that way, they're going to call us and be like, nah, you ain't got to worry about that. Just go set the post. Right. And I would say it's a very rare occasion that somebody calls with something like that. But anyway, try to point all that stuff out on the proposal. And then again in the submittal package, right? Same exact thing. Like your submittals are specifically made for that type of stuff in my mind. Um, but anyway, all right. So material, if they will not pay you for stored materials, because there's scenarios for everything out there, right? But if they won't, well, you got to make a choice. And I can't tell you what to do on that. What I would do would vary a lot from situation to situation, but you're gonna have to decide if you want to roll the dice and wait until it's closer to the job and hope that material cost is either flat or goes down, or can you buy the material for the job and sit on it until it's time to go install it? Um, and so there's two things that come to mind for that is one, can I afford to be without that money for 6 months, 8 months, 3 years, whatever that is? It may be a few weeks. That's cool, right? It may be a few years. That's a little bit less cool. Um, but you got to just make that choice, right? I kind of lean towards the whole buy the material and let it sit here if it's possible. But again, it all depends on the size of the job. If it's a big material bill, then I'm probably going to have to make a choice, right? And I don't know what the answer to that is for me, but anyway, that's the choice. But again, most of the time they're going to be willing to work with you on the material and pay for stored materials because they don't like. I mean, on both sides of this deal, people want it to be successful. The majority of general contractors out there, they want you to be successful and they want their project to be successful and they want to be successful, right? It's not like people are out to get you. I mean, they put a lot of stuff in the contract that protects them, and that's all there in case something goes sideways. It's not there for them to, dangle stuff over your head and for them to be a jerk about it or any of that. Like it's there just in case. There was some lawyer somewhere that experienced some crazy scenario and all of these things got added into contracts. It's not something to sweat about like that, right? It is something to understand and to read and to take seriously, but just kind of, I think knowing the reason that it's there and understanding the intention of everything is, I don't know, maybe it gives me a little bit of peace of mind. Maybe it makes me feel a little bit better about it, but it's anyway. All right. All right. Last time, I promise. So we got the submittals back, right? We've ordered the material. We've sorted through that thing. Another thing I didn't mention about the stored material deal is you're going to have insurance coverage that will cover, ours is called property of others. So you have to have insurance coverage for the material that now belongs to the owner because once they pay you for that material, it is theirs. So you got to have that insurance coverage in place if you're going to bill for stored materials too. Somewhere along the way, I make a work order, right? Whatever you call it, the thing that the crews get when they go out to install the job. I find it a little bit easier to do that whenever I'm going through the submittal process because, I'm already neck deep in the job at this point, and it just makes it a little bit easier. It helps me to remember what the job is whenever we get back to it. We just had to go out and do some work on a job. Now, this is kind of like a part of their closeout deal, right? It wasn't on the punch list. The punch list has been done. This is after. And they called and they said, "Hey, weren't these gates supposed to have these self-closing hinges on them that you submitted?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah, whoops." Well, it turns out the gates didn't have it. We had to go back and do it. I looked at the proposal and I bid the job in January of 2022. And 2 weeks ago, we went and put these hinges on it. So they still haven't completed the project and turned it over to the owner. There's still, a few little things they were trying to get wrapped up there. So they drag out for a long time. So just also keep that in mind, right? With your stored materials. If you do have to keep it, you got to be able to keep it for however long it takes. Huh. You got to keep it until you don't. So making the work order for me, like I said, it's a little bit easier to do. And it helps me to remember whenever we get closer to being ready to do the job, it's where I've compiled all of the information from the project onto a piece of paper or a few pieces of paper to give to a crew. So when I come back to the job 6 months or a year down the road, it's all the same information that I need to look at the job and understand what's going on. Right. So it's all also compiled there for me, for future me. So I think like I said, I think it's a little easier to do it when you're doing submittals. I don't always do it like that. I'm going to tell you, I'm not the best at staying on top of that all the time. There's a lot of times where I'll go through and be like, man, I need to do this. And then I get distracted by something else. And then 6 months down the road, I got to go relearn what the job was and all. So again, that's my experience. And that's my opinion, is that it's better to do when you do submittals. And, so now we go do the job, and doing the job, that's a story for another day. But we, I kind of skipped over safety stuff. So I want to touch on that for just a second. Sometimes you have to do safety stuff. You may have to get some people, through an OSHA 30 class for a job, or you might have to get some people forklift certified. Or we did a job one time and we had to have like a couple different lifts and things like that. And they said, oh, you got to be certified on every one of them. So we had to be certified on like telehandlers, scissor lifts, boom lifts. There was a list of things we had to get certifications for. So that's a part of it. And that happens somewhere in this process. Most of the time you're okay if you're not doing the job in 2 weeks, right? Like you can go get the certifications and all that stuff and submit it later. But that's a thing that you got to do sometimes. And, just there's times where you got to do training on different things, right? Like you might have to have some fall protection. You might have to send people through background checks. You might have to get drug screening done. You might have to get an array of things, right? And that'll happen at some point between the contract and the install. But what I would say about all of that is don't wait until they call you and say, hey, we're ready for you to come install. And you've got the material sitting there. We paid you for the material 6 months ago. Come on out and put it up. And you're like, oh, crap. Wait a minute. I got to go find an OSHA 30 class real quick, because an OSHA 30 takes 30 hours, right? So, I mean, it's not a real quick thing. So again, I would say on that, just keep it in the back of your mind. Don't wait till the last minute. Don't wait for them to call you and then all of a sudden realize you need to go do all this stuff. But hopefully, as you were reviewing the contract and kind of preparing and making your work order and submittals and doing all that, you realized that it had to be done. Hopefully you realized it had to be done when you were bidding the job and you put money in there to do it. Because if you got to send somebody through an OSHA 30, you got to pay them for 30 hours to go through that class, right? So anyway, there's a lot of things that we could sit here and talk about. I mean, there's so many weird scenarios that pop up here and there. But you just kind of navigate through those as you run into them, and you do the best you can. And we just keep going, and we learn a little bit every time, and we try to do better on the next one. And we try to make a little bit of money along the way. Well, that's what I have for you this week. I appreciate you all tuning in, like always. And feel free to reach out anytime you want to. Like I said, phone number's on the bottom, 901-878-4987. And we'll see you next week.